All right, welcome back, grade 11s. So, this, as you know, is JDoodle, which is fun to say and functional. Um, in here, this is where we do some Java coding. Now, all of this stuff you see in here is instructions. These are Java instructions. The stuff you see up top, this thing here and this thing here, for now you can ignore it. All I really want you to know is that anything that is put into this area here, between this bracket and this bracket, right here, anything you put in between is going to be executed when you hit that button. In other words, all of the instructions are going to run. And so what you did yesterday is you realized, and you can put as many spaces in here as you want, but if you put a system.out.print line like that, and you type hello world, like so, with a semicolon at the end, because that ends your line. If we run that, then you'll see it says hello world. And if you were to make a mistake, if you were to little things, unfortunately, have to be perfect in Java, but if I were to type a capital O right there and try to run it, it doesn't know what that is. So you do have to be very precise. But again, anything that's found in what we call the main, between these two brackets, is going to be executed. So system.out.println basically means you're telling the computer system to output something. You're going to print a line. And so that's where those words come from. And we're going to be doing a lot of that because that's how you show the user something. The first concept we're going to talk about is variables. And variables is something that you talk about in math class all the time. We've talked about it in Greenfoot. But in the world of computing, I just made a variable. So this is me declaring a variable. The variable that I've declared is called x, and it is an integer value. So x is a variable that I just made. This is kind of like writing on paper x equals something. It's like that. You're just making a variable, and it's going to store only an integer value. If I then type x equals 10, well then what I've done is I've given the variable a value of 10. And if I execute, absolutely nothing would show up down here. So it's running the program, but there's going to be no output because I haven't asked it to output anything. If I want to see the value of x as an end user, I need to type system.out.println x. So this means show me the value of x. If I execute it now, 10. Now what's interesting is if I put double quotes around it like we did before with hello world, now it's going to print out x. So if I include the double quotes, it means literally print out exactly that. But if I don't include the double quotes, that means show me the value of the variable. So if I run this, well, I'll change this to 20 just to prove my point. Make that a 20, run it, it's going to show me 20. And if I put another variable name like y, it will say, whoa, 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 I have no idea what y is, you can't do that. But if I were to change this and say, hey, I'm going to make a variable called y, and I'm going to give it a value of 20, well now it says, oh, okay, I guess I'll spit out 20. So that's how the world of variables works. Now, you've seen integer. I want to touch on a few other ones. So if I wanted to make a program that added numbers together, then I could do something like this. I could go int y equals 10, int z, and don't forget we're making the names of these variables. They don't have to be one letter either. I could make a variable called Swain if I wanted to. Say I'm going to give that a value of 20, and then I want to know the total. So if I wanted to know the total of those two things, I could make another variable called total, and I'd say I want that to be equal to y plus Swain. And that's where I suppose math and computers differ, in that you wouldn't make a variable name multiple letters. But in the world of computer coding, we can make variable names pretty much whatever we want. And so if I were to run this code after putting system.out.println, because don't forget, I want to see the total when this is done. If I run this, you can see I get 30 because y is 10, Swain is 20, y plus Swain It's weird saying that. Y plus Swain becomes total. So what this line right here says is I want to take the value of Y and add the value of Swain, and I want to put that into the integer variable that's called total, and then spit it out to the screen. What if I wanted to do that with decimals? What if I put Y is 10.5 and Swain is 20.2, and I'm just going to get rid of this while we're at it. I'm just going to call this Z. Would this work? Well, if I run it, you can see I get errors. And that's obviously a problem because the world doesn't just run on integers. If you were to make an accounting program that only used integers, you wouldn't sell very many copies. So if I want to make this variable hold decimals, then I use the word double, like this, and I paste it there and there. And if I run it now, you can see 30.7, it worked. So double is the computer word for saying I want this variable to be a decimal value. And if you're thinking, well, why wouldn't you just make everything a decimal value? The answer is because it takes more computer memory to store a double than it does an int value. So we don't want to make everything doubles because that's going to take up more computer memory, and it's not great practice. Now what would happen if I did this? So if I did double Y plus an int Z, would it let me do that? And the answer is yes, it will. It knows how to add an integer and a double. Okay, it's fine with that. It's just that you're not allowed to declare this variable value. You can't say I want it to be 20.5 and tell it it's an integer because that's breaking the rules. This is not an integer value. If I try to run that, it will break. But I can do math on them. I can subtract as well. I can say Y minus, and I should get a negative number, and there we go. Okay. Now, one last thing in this little tutorial. The other thing that I can do that's kind of neat is I can give this a value. So let's just pretend that I was, I don't know, maybe I want to calculate someone's average. So let's say you've got 4 courses. So I'll say int course 1, and you got 86. And then course 2, you got 83. And then maybe in course 3, you got 90. And then in course 4, not quite as good as the other ones, 77. And your parents told you that if you got a mark that was above, let's say an average above 85, maybe they were going to buy you some sort of gift, like a PlayStation game or whatever, I don't know. Did you do it? Well, we could write a program to find that out. And that's where variables come in handy. We can actually do math on all this stuff. So I could make a variable called average, like AVG. And I could say, well, I know the average is going to be the value of C1 plus C2 plus C3 plus C4 divided by 4. That will get me the average. And I can test my program to see if it works. So let's run this, and hey, look at that, 84. Oh, I didn't quite make it. So let's pretend our parents said 80, just so this has a happy ending. And so here, what I could do is so I've got my variables, and now I've calculated the average, and I can say if AVG is greater than, let's say, 80. Well, in that case, if the average turns out to be greater than 80, we're going to do a system.out.println that says you get the PS4 game. Yay. But we can say else if the average is less than 80. We'll just say you don't get the PS4 game. And so if we run this program as is, you can see because our average is 84, we get the PS4 game. But if we were to say change this mark to like a 50, well now, you don't get the PS4 game. And you can also do other fancy stuff like this. You can say your average is, and then you can end that, and then you can say plus AVG plus, and then that looks kind of weird, doesn't it? But what you're doing is you're actually printing out the average before you print out the message. So if I were to do it now, you can see here your average is 77. You don't get the PS4 game. If that mark were to come up a little bit though to an 89, your average is 87, you get the PS4 game. So here we've learned a little bit about these variables. These are what we call Java primitives, because this is one of the most basic variable that you can learn, integers and doubles. And these are if statements, telling, and you've seen these in Greenfoot. You know, based on a condition, something is going to happen, and that's basically where we want to leave it. So I'm going to post a few exercises for you to do based on this, and good luck.